Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 29 of This Weird Thing Called Life podcast, a young adult's lifestyle podcast where we talk about all kinds of issues and we occasionally have an interview. And today's interview is with Dr. Gregory Canillas. He is a PhD and currently serves as assistant professor in the clinical psychology program at the Chicago School of Professional Psychology's Los Angeles campus. Dr. Canillas has worked in a variety of capacities with adults, college students, as well as with children, adolescents, and families involved in the foster care system, including as a children's social worker with the Department of Children and Family Services, and later as a clinical director of a family preservation program. He has also served as a program director of a pregnant parenting adolescent program. Dr. Canillas served as a lecturer at Loyola Marymount University, where he taught in the undergraduate psychology program. Dr. Canillas also serves as co-chair of the Commission for Youth and Children in Long Beach, California. As commissioner, he is charged with developing services and programs for children, youth, and families, and advising the mayor and city council services for this population. So sit back, relax, clear your mind, and enjoy Dr. Gregory Canillas. We're here with Dr. Greg Canillas. He's assistant professor with the University of Chicago. So welcome to the show.
Thanks, David.
Okay, Dr. Canillas, can you tell us a little about yourself and how you got to where you are today?
Sure, Nadia. As David said, I'm an assistant professor of clinical psychology at the Los Angeles campus of the Chicago School of Professional Psychology. So basically, I train master's and doctoral students who are interested in careers in marriage and family therapy, as well as clinical psychologists. I did my undergraduate work at the University of California at Santa Cruz, and my graduate work at the California School of Professional Psychology in Los Angeles. And before I took the current position, I spent some time as a clinical psychologist, seeing clients, children, adolescents, families, adults, couples, and also held a number of administrative positions before assuming the full-time faculty position.
Okay, are you originally from California?
I am, from Los Angeles.
All right, cool. So I like to ask this question to some people, just kind of get a feel for who you are. So what's the most important decision that you've ever made in your life? And if it's personal, you don't have to tell me. Okay. The most important decision that you can tell us and you can tell our audience that you've ever made in your life.
Honestly, I think the most important decision I ever made was to continue my education beyond the bachelor's degree. I wanted to do something that was community focused, that would help the African American community and the larger community. So I decided to go to graduate school and pursue a doctorate in clinical psychology. Most recently, I think the most important decision I made was to become full-time faculty.
Okay.
I've done a lot of clinical work and administrative work, and I've taught for a number of years as an adjunct faculty member when I was doing both the clinical and administrative work. And recently, like the last 2 years, I became full-time faculty, and it's allowed me to do even more in terms of research and presenting and getting out in the community to talk about psychological issues. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of stigma around mental health issues, particularly in the African American community and other communities of color. And so really getting out there and talking to people about this particular field has been really helpful and has re-energized my career in wanting to do this, because I've been doing it for some time now.
Okay. And I know psychology is a very broad subject. Are there any specific areas that you concentrate in or that you're passionate about?
Yes. So I am a family systems person. I really look at the family system and how that system has impacted people's decisions in terms of relationship, careers, etc. And so focus on things like dating and relationships, infidelity. Also have a specialization in child adolescent psychology. And so I've done a lot of work with families. Children in foster care is another area, as well as diversity in mental health and career-related issues.
Okay. Now the whole dating and relationships one that's a popular issue on this show. But today we're talking to our audience about the subject of motivation.
Okay.
So what are the things that actually motivate us as human beings? Like, for example, why do we even get up in the morning? Is it biological? Do we instinctively do it, or is it because we have a passion about something?
So there are a number of reasons why we might be motivated to do something. Some of them are biological, like the need to eat, sleep, things like that. And then there are also intrinsic motivators and extrinsic motivators. So an example of extrinsic motivator would be like a paycheck. So, going to work and getting paid. Whereas an intrinsic one would be more internal. And so you'll be driven by internal motive to do something.
Since you actually did mention extrinsic and intrinsic motivation, that's something that often comes up in the behavior change field. So I'm wondering, what techniques can people use to make behavior and lifestyle changes easier to accomplish?
I think the first thing that people have to do is recognize there's an issue and then work from there. A lot of times people will have insight into issues. A lot of the clients that I've worked with, but they don't necessarily change their behavior. So recognizing that there's an issue is like the first step, and then being willing to put the work in to really change the behavior. So lots of people, every year, at the beginning of the year, who want to lose weight. They know it's an issue. They know that if they do that, they'll be healthier, they'll maybe look better, feel better. But knowing that doesn't always mean that they make the change. It's actually doing the behavioral change, taking the steps that will make that happen that are important. So it's knowing what the issue is, but it's also being willing to commit to making the behavioral change that will ensure that it changes the habit. It takes about 6 months for people to usually do that. That's about the average for people to make behavioral change.
Okay. And I recently read about a company that uses a mild electric shock bracelet to help people make behavior change. Is that something you actually use in practice? I mean, this product was more like, someone might self-shock themselves. And again, it's a mild shock. But is that something that is used in psychological practice to kind of help people make these changes?
I know that that's something that has been used in psychological practice, that was part of the history, probably the negative history associated with psychology. I don't think that people really use that today. I think that they're probably negatives.
Yeah, and that's why I was curious to hear what you had to say, because the people, who are associated with this company did make that point that it was a negative and they're kind of bringing it back. So I was just curious if maybe this was something that is used in professional psychological practice that's kind of making its way around to the consumer market, but it doesn't sound that way. So this might just be something new that people are experimenting with right now.
Yeah, I don't know any of my colleagues that are using that. Again, I know that had been used before, like with weight loss and things like that, or in attempts to modify kids' behavior that people might have considered problematic. But I don't think that that's necessarily a good thing. I think that is a negative thing that was used but discarded by many people and not found to be really effective.
Okay, great.
So our show targets a lot of young adults, typically in their 20s and 30s, and we deal with a lot of issues that deal with the African American community, but also other minority communities. And there's a lot of young people who are just kind of getting out of college and they're trying to find work, and some of them are unemployed. So how do they motivate themselves to keep searching for employment after going on several interviews and not getting called back? Because sometimes that can get very depressing for them.
Yes, I've had the experience myself when looking for positions, and know many people that I've worked with. And so I think you just have to keep going, David. I think you have to make it into your job for the moment, and make sure that you are actively, pursuing positions. Letting people know that you're looking for employment is really important. A lot of people don't do that, but a lot of the jobs that I've job offers that I've received have been through people that I know. So letting people know that you're unemployed and you're looking is oftentimes really helpful, because they will connect you to resources or to job leads. And if you're not doing that, people don't know to give you that information. So really staying motivated, making it into a job. And then there's some things that I think people can do that are really helpful in terms of making themselves really good candidates when they're applying for jobs.
And Dr. Canillas, you did give some tips of how people can help themselves stand out from other job applicants. Are there any other considerations that they should take when they're trying to distinguish themselves from other people applying for the same job?
Mm-hmm. I worked in administrative positions that I mentioned before, and so I've had some experience with reviewing resumes, interviewing folks for positions, and there's some things that kind of stand out, and there's some tips that I would like to share with your listeners that might be really helpful, especially listeners who are in their 20s and 30s and just starting out. Really, you want to develop a really good resume, and make sure that you include really strong bullet points or brief paragraphs about things that are real skills for you, and use action words developed, I developed a program, or reduced. For example, I reduced spending on office supplies, things like that. So it should be really focused on action. Make sure that you talk about skills that you possess. And a lot of times people leave out things that are important. I've helped folks to come up with resumes. One of my positions, I worked on a college campus where I worked in an office where that was part of the position. And so a lot of times when I sat down with people to write their resumes, they didn't really have a complete view of the skill set that they have. So sitting down and writing out the skills that you have and talking to people like coworkers about that, so that you have a balanced view. Making sure you include relevant volunteer service, and then making sure that you write a really good cover letter. A lot of people don't write cover letters when they submit resumes. They just submit the resume without a summary of the experience that they have accumulated.
And what about the length of the resume? I often hear that sometimes you should keep it to one page, but other people say that you should put as much experience that you have and use several pages. So what would you recommend as far as how long a resume should be?
Honestly, I think it can be as long as you need it to be. If you only have a little bit of experience, probably keeping it to one page would be good. But if you have maybe, 4 or 5 positions, 2 pages, 3 pages is good. And in academia, though, we do a curriculum vitae, and they can be as long as 10, 15 pages.
Okay.
So it depends, I think, on the position that people are applying for and how much work experience they've had.
Yeah, I assume as, you being a professor or I guess a assistant professor, those resumes, I'm assuming, can be 15 pages, 16 pages, because you have to list your, academic research and, okay.
Yeah, you list every job that you've had. I've had clinical positions, administrative positions, teaching positions, so those all go on there, as well as presentations that I do at conferences, media contact, volunteer experience, all that stuff. So I think mine is 12 pages now.
Okay.
Yeah, so they can get kind of long. With resumes, they don't expect them to be that long, but probably two to three.
Now, you sound like a relatively young guy. We've never met before, obviously. Kind of how long have you been teaching?
I've been teaching for about 16 years.
Okay.
Yeah, so not that young.
Okay.
Not that young. So
Yeah.
probably I finished graduate school at about 27 and have been teaching for about 16 years or so.
Okay.
And clinical work and administrative work.
So what are some tips to help listeners shine in interviews?
That's a good question, David. Some of the things that I think people forget to do oftentimes is like research the employer, which is an easy thing to do with the internet. I mean, everybody can just go on the internet and find out things about the employer, like what the organization or agency's mission or purpose is. And then they can shape their responses in the interview to include that mission, like how they can contribute to the mission. Really prepare. I've seen a lot of folks come in and they're not really prepared for the interview, but you want to treat it again like you're doing research, like you are really interested in the position. That makes the difference. I suggest to people that they write out answers to questions so that they can speak logically and coherently in the interview. Not to memorize them though, so that it doesn't sound like they are, just
A
producing
robot.
something. Yeah, like a robot, exactly. That's not what you want to do in an interview. You don't want to come off as a robot. But if you can, speak logically and coherently about how you best fit in that agency or organization, I think that makes the difference. And the more prepared people are, they tend to do better. Like, think about like testing, like when undergraduate school or graduate school and you have tests, the more prepared people are, usually the more confident
Hello?
they.
Oh.
Yes, can you hear me?
Kind of went out for a second. I can hear you now.
Okay, perfect. If they study for a test, then they're usually more confident, and that usually comes across in the interview too if you prepare.
You know what I also found is pretty good is if you research the people you are interviewing. A lot of times you can go to LinkedIn and you can kind of see what their background, and that helps me out a lot.
Absolutely. I think you need to get the names of the people who will be interviewing you. So It might be one person, but a lot of times now agencies or organizations are doing like group interviews. And so if there are multiple people, it's a good idea to get the names of those people. And like you said, research them on LinkedIn or Google them, find out what their interests are, what their accomplishments are, and try to work those into the conversation. Like Ms. Jones, I read that you recently won such and such award, or Mr. Thomas, I read on the website that your division was successful in doing blah, blah, blah. And I think that really can make it much more conversational, and it shows that the person is interested in the company and also the people that work there.
And after you have an interview, what would you recommend that people do to follow up?
Nadia, I think that they really should send a thank you note. And a lot of people actually don't do that. You'd be surprised by how many people don't really do that. I think that a note, you can do it on like good stationery and send like a handwritten note. But a lot of times what I would do or recommend doing is a typed letter that thanks the interview for their time and reiterates why that person is the best candidate for the position. And if it's a group interview, you need to send it to everybody that was on that committee. Like in my current position, I interviewed with 12 people and mailed a letter to each person. So never mail it only to like the chairperson of the committee. Make sure that you mail it to everybody that was on the committee, because you never know who really is advocating for you behind the scenes. It might not be the chair of the committee. It might be one of the other persons that are on the committee.
Now, I know what a lot of people who listening may think is, they don't send letters anymore. They may send an email. So what about emails? Is that acceptable? A thank you email? Because that's when I worked in an administrative position as well, that tended to be the more common thing I've seen is people sending email. So is that something that people can do, or should they actually stick to the writing out a letter or typing it out?
I actually think you can print it out and put it in an envelope and put it in regular postal mail.
Okay.
As you know, being in administration, you get hundreds of emails a day, especially when you're advertising for a position. Mm-hmm. So it's oftentimes those thank you emails and even resumes, when people first send those in, can get lost in the shuffle. But when you actually mail something in, and I would say this is true of the resume and the cover letter also, it should be mailed postal mail, then people actually physically have to handle that. They have to open the envelope and look at your resume, look at your cover letter, your thank you letter, and actually, they put that on their desk probably. I think you're more likely to come to that person's mind when they're thinking about hiring for the position than somebody who sends an email. Because everybody sends emails now.
Okay.
And I think it's easy for those to get lost. So that's what I would recommend, is that people send them in. I mean, again, that's what I did with the last position the current position that I have. Is sent out 12 letters. Okay. And each person on the committee got a letter in their hand.
And is it the same letter? Do you write out the same stuff or on each letter, or do you kind of change up the paragraphs a bit for each person?
For the thank you letter, I think it can be the same. Okay. It's just obviously you want to change the
name.
Person's name, but that can be the same. I think it can be the same thing unless there's something that sticks out with that person that you want to add, like area of research, or you want to work in that person's division. Then I think you can make that a little bit different. But pretty much it's the same letter. Again, highlighting the person's skills and what you bring to the position, and how you would be the best fit for that organization.
Yeah, I think that's a big thing a lot of people miss. They never really state what they are going to bring to the organization. You got to kind of think like the employer, like, why am I hiring you? What value are you going to add to our agency or our company? So that's some good advice you gave.
Exactly. What do you bring to the agency? And they want to know how you're going to impact the team. Are you going to be a positive team player, or are you going to create, issues for the agency? So I think really pointing out how you're the best fit for that position as well as to join that team is important. And a lot of people do forget that.
Okay, so say if you have a job and you love the job you do, but your passion for the job has died down because of work-life balance issues. You're working, 60 or 70 hours a week. I mean, you're still passionate about the job, but the work hours are killing you. How does someone stay motivated, or should they quit that job or maybe start their own thing? What do you think?
I think it depends on the issue. I think for a lot of people, though, that struggle with the issue that you mentioned, like not having passion about the job anymore, or losing sight of why they got into that particular career or job. For a lot of those folks, I try to encourage them to figure out what motivated them to get into the work the first place. So maybe it was something that was altruistic, like I want to help people, or I'm really interested in this particular type of career. Whatever the reason, the initial reasons were for that person getting involved in that particular area, I think going back and looking at that again can help to motivate the person if they've kind of lost their way or are feeling like they're not making an impact.
Okay.
I recently did an interview for a magazine article that I'm writing.
You said you did an interview for a magazine?
Yes,
okay.
For a magazine that focuses on foster care, and I spoke to the national president of the National Foster Parent Association about motivating foster parents. And one of the things she said was what I'm saying now is really when people kind of lost their way in that particular field, one of the things that she likes to remind folks of is why they got into fostering kids in the first place. And so a lot of times when we come into certain fields or areas of specialization, there was a reason why we did it initially. But you can kind of get bogged down by the work-life stuff, work-life balance issues, and feeling overwhelmed. I think it's good to go back to that original place, and that in and of itself can be a motivator. And then sometimes it's changing positions. Sometimes you don't have to switch fields, but you might change a position or go to a new employer, and that might reignite the flame that got you into whatever career or position you're in.
Okay.
Okay, and What's a habit that someone can adopt that requires little effort but can make the greatest difference in someone's quality of life?
Honestly, I think it's exercising. And I know I don't do it as much as I should, but I think getting people to exercise, that can help to deal with some of the stuff that you all have mentioned, like work-life balance. It really is a stress reducer for a lot of people.
There's so much
Um,
effort.
yes and no. Like I think you have to, like anything, you have to carve out time for it. Even if it's like walking for 10 minutes or, jogging or going to the gym for 10 or 20 minutes. If you can kind of work that in a few times a week, there are a lot of health benefits for that. There are certain like chemicals that when you exercise make you a little bit happier. So a lot of times when we have depressed patients, that's one of the things that we advocate for them to do. It is a little harder for people to do sometimes, but once you get into it, I think that can be really helpful.
A lot of guys, when they're stressed, they may go to the gym, and that may, make them unstressed. So, yeah, I could see
Yeah,
that working.
again, it's something that can be free. I mean, anybody can take a walk around the block. You don't necessarily have to even have a gym membership. And again, there are a lot of health benefits, physical health benefits, and mental health benefits for that. And it's an easy kind of solution for being unmotivated. We were talking earlier about people who are looking for jobs, and it's a long-term thing. A lot of times, doing that can reduce some of the stress around that as well.
And what would you say is one of the biggest life lessons you've learned or taught to someone else that you think is important for young adults to learn?
That's a good question, Nutty. I think really to think things through. That has become a major life lesson for me that I wish I probably knew in my 20s or 30s. So, don't make really snap decisions, whether it's about careers or relationships or going back to school, not going back to school. Really think things through and think about consequences of certain actions, how that will shape your life, your career, your relationships, can be really helpful.
Well, that's a really good one. I think that will save people a lot of trouble in life if they adhere to that.
So you're saying just stop and think it through to the end, run it in your mind many, many times, and
Yes.
then act.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Because sometimes people make really snap decisions. Like I've worked with a lot of people who quit jobs really quickly. They don't like the job. They don't like the employer. Whatever it is, they're stressed, and they don't sometimes even have other jobs. And right now it might be difficult to find jobs really quickly. And then there are new stressors that come about because it's taking them longer to find a job, and they have rent, car payments, etc. So sometimes people don't really think things through, and it gets them into more trouble. And that will include myself. I think I've learned quite a few lessons from that myself.
Okay.
Really to think things through and not make snap decisions, because those decisions can impact you in ways that you didn't imagine.
Are you practicing in your field or?
Right. I have a history of practicing and seeing clients. I'm not practicing right now. I'm actually just doing the full-time teaching.
Okay.
I will probably go into practice in the fall. I'll go back into practice in the fall. And again, I see children, adolescents, families, adults, couples. And so I kind of miss that. I haven't practiced in a few years. And so I'm wanting to do that again.
So what issue is the most common? Do young people come to you the most with certain issues, or I'm trying to get an idea on like the issues you deal with or the issues that people come to you with.
It runs the gamut.
Or or is it just everything?
It's everything.
Okay.
I see clients about coaching clients about how to like do some of the things that we're talking about, like reignite their passion around careers. I see clients who are depressed or anxious about issues. I've had couples that I see around like infidelity issues or communication, finance, sex, relationship issues. I've worked with children and adolescents on issues around diagnoses like ADHD, clients around substance abuse issues. There's a range of client issues that I...
You kind of broke up there at the end. But I think essentially what you said, there's a range of issues that you deal with.
Yes, absolutely. A range of issues. Everything from depression to substance abuse to anxiety to relationship issues between parents and children or couples. There's quite a range.
So is there a favorite quote that you have that you can leave our listeners with that'll help them motivate them through the week, through the month, through the year?
One of the quotes that I've been focused on the probably the last couple of days is either you're a blessing or a lesson. And so I think people have to look for the blessing or the lesson in whatever is happening at the time. Mm-hmm. That is something that I try to pull out of every interaction, whether it's looking for a job or a relationship issue. Really looking for the blessing or the lesson in that.
So it's not like you're failing. Everything is you learn a lesson from. So it's either a blessing or you're learning a lesson. I like that.
Absolutely.
Well, Doctor, you've been a great guest. We went over in time, but I think it was worth it. Thanks for joining us today. Where can our listeners find more about you and what work you do?
You can look me up on the Chicago page, the Chicago School of Professional Psychology. Basically, just Google me. First name Gregory, last name is Canillas. If you want to find out more about the teaching and research and the presentations that I have that are upcoming, listeners can also follow me on Twitter. My Twitter handle is DrGJCanillas, Dr. GJ Canillas, or Facebook, Gregory Canillas, and on Instagram, DRC9.
All right. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Nadia.
Thank you so much.
Have a good evening. I'd like to thank Greg for coming on, and I'd like to thank all of you for listening to another episode. If you have any questions or comments about anything you heard today, you can tweet us. Our handle is TWTCL Podcast, or visit our website at weirdthingcalledlife.com. And remember to rate us. Rating is very easy. It takes a little time and it helps a lot. So if you're using iTunes, give us a 5-star rating. We really appreciate it. And you can help this podcast get out to more people and they can enjoy it just like you are. Till next week. See you later.
And they stay there, and they say yeah, and they say there. Cause all I do is win. And if you going in, put your hands in the air, make them stay there. Ludacris going in on the verse, cause I never been defeated and I won't stop now. Keep your hands up, get them in the sky for the homies that ain't make it in my folks locked down. I never went nowhere, what they saying Luda's back. Blame it on that contour, the hood call it Luda-yak. And I'm on this foolish track, so I spit my foolish flow. My hands go up and down, like strippers' booties go. My verses still be serving, tight like a million virgins. Last time on a college remix, now I'm on the original version. Can't never count me out, y'all better count me in. Got 20 bank accounts, accountants count me in. Make millions every year, the South's champion. Cause all I do is win, no matter what. Got money on my mind, I can never get it up. And every time I step up in the building, everybody hands go up. And they stay there, and they say yeah, and they stay there. Cause all I do is win. And if you going in, put your hands in the air, make them stay there. Swerving in my low, head on the swivel, you know serving me's a no-no. Clean as a whistle as I pull out in my Rolls Royce. Yellow bone passenger, they see it, they say, oh boy. Tell Cali, back it up, my niggas call me loco. Down for armed trafficking, don't make me pull that fofo. Ask you what you laughing at, represent that mud life. Dirty money, bitch, you better get your mud right. We come together holding hands and holler hood life. We all strapping all black, It's like Bud Light. All we do is win. You riding to what? Cause we riding tonight. Now you riding with me cause you wasn't riding. All I do is win, 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 no matter what. Got money on my mind, I can never get it up. And every time I step up in the building, everybody hands go up. And they stay there, and they say yeah, and they stay there. Cause all I do is win, win, win. And if you going in, put your hands in the air, make them stay there.
Heat in the kitchen, pot on the stove, water getting boiled, dope being sold, Snoopy in the hootie, system overload. I've been running this rap game since I was 20 years old. I hung with the worst of them, bust till I burst them up, floss them up, toss them up, harder way, close them up. Pardon me, I'm bossing up, brace you up, bless you, bro, don't mess with us. We like the youth in the 80s.